Have you ever noticed how a simple 10-minute conversation can sometimes leave you feeling like you just run a marathon? You walk away from an encounter feeling heavy, foggy, or just plain exhausted, even if the person you were talking to wasn't necessarily being unkind. It's a strange phenomenon, but it's incredibly common. We often talk about physical exhaustion from work or lack of sleep, but social and emotional drainage is a very real thing that can impact your mental health and your productivity. Understanding why certain people act as a drain on your battery is the first step toward protecting your energy. One of the most frequent reasons you feel this way is that you are dealing with a conversational narcissist. Now, this isn't always a diagnosis of a personality disorder, sometimes it's just a very ingrained habit. These are the people who view a conversation not as a bridge between two people, but as a stage for a solo performance. When you're talking to them, you might notice that every story you tell is immediately met with a one-up or a pivot back to their own life. You spend the entire duration of the chat in a state of high alert waiting for a gap to speak that never comes, or worse, realizing that they aren't actually listening to your responses, they're just waiting for their next turn to talk. This lack of reciprocity is exhausting, because human connection is supposed to be a give and take. When it's all take, your brain works overtime to stay engaged with someone who isn't returning the favor. Moving beyond just the flow of words, we have to look at the emotional weight being shared. This brings us to the second reason, the emotional dump. We all have bad days, and we all need to vent, but some people use their friends and family as unpaid therapists without ever asking for permission. You might start a conversation hoping for a lighthearted catch-up, only to be hit with an hour-long catalog of every grievance, health issue, and workplace drama in their lives. This is draining, because it forces you into a passive, caretaking role. You're absorbing their stress, anxiety, and frustration, while suppressing your own needs to be heard. Because you're likely a person with a high level of empathy, your brain is literally trying to process their trauma as if it were your own, and that takes a massive amount of metabolic energy. The third factor often involves a lack of boundaries, but in a very specific way, the crisis seeker. You know the type, the person whose life is a constant series of emergencies that only you can help solve. They don't just talk, they demand your mental real estate. They ask for advice, but never take it, only to return a week later with the same problem, now magnified. This creates a cycle of frustration. You feel drained, because you're investing your intellectual and emotional effort into a bottomless pit. Your mind is trying to find a resolution for them, but because they aren't actually looking for a solution, you're left spinning your wheels. It's the mental equivalent of trying to drive a car with the parking brake on. Another reason for this exhaustion is a bit more subtle, and it has to do with performative interaction. Sometimes the person isn't doing anything wrong, but you feel you have to wear a mask around them. Maybe they are highly judgmental, or perhaps they have very rigid views on how people should behave. When you're with them, you can't be your authentic self. You're constantly editing your thoughts, filtering your humor, and monitoring your body language to avoid conflict or disapproval. This self-monitoring is a high-level cognitive task. It's like running a complex program in the background of your brain, while trying to carry on a normal conversation. By the time you say goodbye, your system is overheated from the sheer effort of maintaining that persona. Then there is the negativity bias. Some people aren't necessarily talking about themselves, but they have a persistent black cloud outlook on the world. Every topic, the weather, the news, the coffee you're drinking, is met with a complaint or a cynical remark. Constant negativity acts as a literal depressant for the people around them. As social creatures, we tend to mirror the moods of those we spend time with through something called emotional contagion. If someone is radiating pessimism, your nervous system picks up on those cues and begins to downregulate. You leave the interaction feeling low, because you've essentially caught their mood like a cold. Finally, we have to consider the issue of clash of social styles. This isn't about someone being a bad person. It's about a fundamental mismatch in energy levels. If you are an introvert who values deep, slow-paced and meaningful connection, spending time with a high-energy, fast-talking shouter or someone who thrives on small talk and rapid-fire gossip can be overwhelming. Your brain is trying to process information at a rate it isn't designed for. It's not that the other person is doing anything harmful. It's just that the frequency they operate on is incompatible with yours. It's like listening to a flute and a jackhammer at the same time. The sensory overload alone is enough to make you want to go take a long nap in a dark room. Recognizing these patterns doesn't mean you have to cut these people out of your life entirely. But it does mean you should start being more intentional about when and how you engage with them. Your energy is a finite resource and you have every right to protect it.